Suffering and Morality. The paradoxes inherent in theistic theories have engaged the minds of Western theologians and philosophers for centuries. For example, if God is perfect, why is there evil in the world? Why does an omnipotent God allow suffering when he has the power to abolish it at one stroke? Sri Ramana sidesteps such conundrums by stating that the world, God, and the individual who suffers are all inventions of the mind. All religions first postulate three principles: the world, the soul, and God. To say that one principle alone appears as the three principles, or that the three principles are always three principles, is possible only as long as the ego exists. Instead of attributing suffering to the consequence of wrong actions or to the will of God, Sri Ramana taught that it only arises because we imagine that we are separate individuals interacting with each other and with the world. He said that wrong actions compound the suffering and are therefore to be avoided, but they are not its original cause. It is the mind that creates the illusion of separateness, and it is the mind that suffers the consequences of its illusory inventions. Suffering is thus a product and consequence of the discriminative mind. When the mind is eliminated, suffering is found to be non-existent. Many questioners could relate to this idea on an individual level, but they found it hard to accept that all the suffering in the world existed only in the mind of the person who perceived it. Sri Ramana was quite adamant about this, and he repeatedly said that if one realizes the self, one will know that all suffering, not just one's own, is non-existent. Taking this idea to its logical conclusion, Sri Ramana often said the most effective way of eliminating other people's suffering was to realize the self. This standpoint should not be interpreted to mean that Sri Ramana encouraged his followers to ignore the suffering of other people. On a more pragmatic level, he said that prior to self-realization, one should accept the reality of other people's suffering and take steps to relieve it whenever one comes across it. However, he also pointed out that such remedial actions would only be spiritually beneficial if they were done without the feeling that other people less fortunate than me are being helped, and without the feeling that I am performing these actions. On the whole, the question of what one should do or should not in the world was of little interest to Sri Ramana. He maintained the view that all conventional ideas about right and wrong were valued judgments made by the mind, and that when the mind ceases to exist, ideas about right and wrong also cease. Because of this, he rarely spoke about the conventional canons of morality, and whenever he was pressed to offer an opinion on them, he would usually sidestep the issue by saying that the only right action was discovering the self. What do you consider to be the cause of world suffering, and how can we help to change it as individuals or collectively? Realize the real self. It is all that is necessary. In this life beset with limitations, can I ever realize the bliss of the self? That bliss of the self is always with you, and you will find it for yourself if you would seek it earnestly. The cause of your misery is not in the life outside you. It is in you as the ego. You impose limitations on yourself and then make a vain struggle to transcend them. All unhappiness is due to the ego. With it comes all your trouble. What does it avail you to attribute to the happenings in life the cause of misery which is really within you? What happiness can you get from things extraneous to yourself? When you get it, how long will it last? If you would deny the ego and scorch it by ignoring it, you would be free. If you accept it, it will impose limitations on you and throw you into a vain struggle to transcend them. To be the self that you really are is the only means to realize the bliss that is ever yours. If there truly is neither bondage nor liberation, what is the reason for the actual experience of joys and sorrows? They appear to be real only when one turns aside from one's real nature. They do not really exist. Is the world created for happiness or misery? Creation is neither good nor bad. It is as it is. It is the human mind which puts all sorts of constructions on it, seeing things from its own angle and interpreting them to suit its own interests. A woman is just a woman, but one mind calls her mother, another sister, and still another aunt, and so on. Men love women, hate snakes, and are indifferent to the grass and stones by the roadside. These value judgments are the cause of all the misery in the world. Creation is like the peepul tree. Birds come to eat its fruit or take shelter under its branches. Men cool themselves in its shade, but some may hang themselves on it. Yet the tree continues to lead its quiet life, unconcerned with and unaware of all the uses it is put to. It is the human mind that creates its own difficulties and then cries for help. Is God so partial as to give peace to one person and sorrow to another? In creation there is room for everything, but man refuses to see the good, the healthy, and the beautiful. Instead he goes on whining like the hungry man who sits beside the tasty dish and who, instead of stretching out his hand to satisfy his hunger, goes on lamenting. Whose fault is it, God's or man's? If God is all, why does the individual suffer for his actions? Are not the actions for which the individual is made to suffer prompted by him? He who thinks he is the doer is also the sufferer. But the actions are prompted by God, and the individual is only his tool. This logic is applied only when one suffers, but not when one rejoices. If the conviction prevails always, there will be no suffering either. When will the suffering cease? Not until individuality is lost. If both the good and bad actions are his, why should you think that the enjoyment and suffering are yours alone? He who does good or bad also enjoys pleasure or suffers pain. Leave it there, and do not superimpose suffering on yourself. Now, how can you say that suffering is non-existent? I see it everywhere. One's own reality, which shines within everyone as the heart, is itself the ocean of unalloyed bliss. Therefore, like the unreal blueness of the sky, misery does not exist in reality, but only in mere imagination. Since one's own reality, which is the sun of jnana, that cannot be approached by the dark delusion of ignorance, itself shines as happiness. Misery is nothing but an illusion caused by the unreal sense of individuality. In truth, no one has ever experienced any such thing other than that unreal illusion. If one scrutinizes one's own self, which is bliss, there will be no misery at all in one's life. One suffers because of the idea that the body, which is never oneself, is I. Suffering is all due to this delusion. I suffer both in mind and body. From the day of my birth I have never had happiness. My mother too suffered from the time she conceived me, I hear. Why do I suffer thus? I have not sinned in this life. Is all this due to the sins of past lives? You say the mind and body suffer. But do they ask the questions? Who is the questioner? Is it not the one that is beyond both mind and body? You say the body suffers in this life and ask if the cause of this is the previous life. If that is so, then the cause of that life is the one before it, and so on. So like the case of the seed and the sprout, there is no end to the causal series. It has to be said that all the lives have their first cause in ignorance. That same ignorance is present even now, framing this question. That ignorance must be removed by jnana. Why and to whom did the suffering come? If you question thus, you will find that the I is separate from the mind and body, and that the self is the only eternal being, and that it is eternal bliss. That is jnana. I suffer from worries without end. There is no peace for me, though there is nothing wanting for me to be happy. Do these worries affect you in sleep? No, they do not. Are you the very same man now, or are you different from him that slept without any worry? Yes, I am the same person. Then surely those worries do not belong to you. It is your own fault if you assume that they are yours. When we suffer grief and complain and appeal to you by letter or mentally by prayer, are you not moved to feel what a pity it is that your child suffers like this? If one felt like that, one would not be a jnani. We see pain in the world. A man is hungry. It is a physical reality, and as such it is very real to him. Are we to call it a dream and remain unmoved by his pain? From the point of view of jnana, or the reality, the pain you speak of is certainly a dream, as is the world of which the pain is an infinitesimal part. In the dream also, you yourself feel hunger. You see others suffering hunger. You feed yourself and, moved by pity, feed the others that you find suffering from hunger. So long as the dream lasts, all those hunger pains are quite as real as you now think the pain you see in the world to be. It is only when you wake up that you discover that the pain in the dream was unreal. You might have eaten to the full and gone to sleep. You dream that you work hard and long in the hot sun all day, are tired and hungry, and want to eat a lot. Then you get up and find your stomach is full, and you have not stirred out of your bed. But all this is not to say that while you are in the dream you can act as if the pain you feel there is not real. The hunger in the dream has to be assuaged by food in the dream. The fellow beings you found so hungry in the dream had to be provided with food in that dream. You can never mix up the two states, the dream and the waking state, till you reach the state of jnana, and thus wake out of this maya. You must do social service by relieving suffering whenever you see it. But even then you must do it, as we are told, without ahamkara, that is, without the sense I am the doer, but feeling I am the Lord's tool. Similarly, one must not be conceited and think, I am helping a man below me. He needs help. I am in a position to help. I am superior and he inferior. You must help the man as a means of worshiping God in that man. All such service, too, is for the self, not for anybody else. You are not helping anybody else, but only yourself. In the case of persons who are not capable of long meditation, will it not be enough if they engage themselves in doing good to others? Yes, it will do. The idea of good will be in their heart. That is enough. Good, God, love are all the same thing. If the person keeps continuously thinking of any one of these, it will be enough. All meditation is for the purpose of keeping out all other thoughts. So one should try to ameliorate suffering, even if one knows that ultimately it is non-existent. There never was and never will be a time when all are equally happy or rich or wise or healthy. In fact, none of these terms has any meaning except in so far as the opposite to it exists. But that does not mean that when you come across anyone who is less happy or more miserable than yourself, you are not to be moved to compassion or to seek to relieve him as best you can. On the contrary, you must love all and help all, since only in that way can you help yourself. When you seek to reduce the suffering of any fellow man or fellow creature, whether your efforts succeed or not, you are yourself evolving spiritually, especially if such service is rendered disinterestedly, not with the egotistic feeling, I am doing this, but in the spirit God is making me the channel of this service. He is the doer, and I am the instrument. If one knows the truth that all that one gives to others is giving only to oneself, who indeed will not be a virtuous person and perform the kind act of giving to others? Since everyone is one's own self, whoever does whatever to whomever is doing it only to to himself. There are widespread disasters spreading havoc in the world, for example, famine and pestilence. What is the cause of this state of affairs? To whom does all this appear? That won't do. I see misery everywhere. You are not aware of the world and its sufferings in your sleep, but you are conscious of them now in your waking state. Continue in that state in which you were not afflicted by them. That is to say, when you are not aware of the world, its sufferings do not affect you. When you remain as the self, as in sleep, the world and its sufferings will not affect you. Therefore, look within, see the self, then there will be an end of the world and its miseries. But that is selfishness. The world is not external. Because you identify yourself wrongly with the body, you see the world outside, and its pain becomes apparent to you. But they are not real. Seek the reality and get rid of this unreal feeling. There are great men, public workers, who cannot solve the problem of the misery of the world. They are ego-centered, and that accounts for their inability. If they remained in the self, they would be different. Why do not Mahatmas help? How do you know that they do not help? Public speeches, physical activity, and material help are all outweighed by the silence of Mahatmas. They accomplish more than others. What is to be done for us for ameliorating the condition of the world? If you remain free from pain, there will be no pain anywhere. The trouble now is due to your seeing the world externally and also thinking that there is pain there. But both the world and pain are within you. If you look within, there will be no pain. God is perfect. Why did he create the world imperfect? The work shares the nature of the author, but here it is not so. Who is it that raises the question? I, the individual? Are you apart from God that you ask this question? So long as you consider yourself to be the body, you see the world as external and the imperfections appear to you. God is perfection. His work also is perfection, but you see it as imperfection because of your wrong identification. Why did the self manifest as this miserable world? In order that you might seek it. Your eyes cannot see themselves. Place a mirror before them, and they see themselves. Similarly with creation. See yourself first, and then see the whole world as the self. So it amounts to this, that I should always look within? Yes. Should I not see the world at all? You are not instructed to shut your eyes to the world. You are only to see yourself first, and then see the whole world as the self. If you consider yourself as the body, the world appears to be external. If you are the self, the world appears as Brahman. What is the best way to work for world peace? What is the world? What is peace? And who is the worker? The world is not in your sleep and forms a projection of your mind in your Jagrat, waking state. It is therefore an idea, nothing else. Peace is absence of disturbance. The disturbance is due to the arising of thoughts in the individual, which is only the ego rising up from pure consciousness. To bring about peace means to be free from thoughts, and to abide as pure consciousness. If one remains at peace oneself, there is only peace everywhere. If it is a question of doing something one considers wrong and thereby saving someone else from a great wrong, should one do it or refrain? What is right and wrong? There is no standard by which to judge something to be right and another to be wrong. Opinions differ according to the nature of the individual and according to the surroundings. They are again ideas and nothing more. Do not worry about them, but get rid of thoughts instead. If you always remain in the right, then right will prevail in the world. Will not right conduct be enough to secure salvation? Salvation for whom? Who wants salvation? And what is right conduct? What is conduct? And what is right? Who is to judge what is right and what is wrong? According to previous samskaras, each one regards something or other as right. Only when the reality is known can the truth about right and wrong be known. The best course is to find out who wants this salvation. Tracing this who, or ego, to its original source is the right conduct for everyone. Will not the practice of good conduct, nitya karmas, lead to salvation? Several books state that it will. It is said so in the books. Who denies that good conduct is good or that it will eventually lead you to the goal? Good conduct, or satkarma, purifies the chitta, or mind, and gives you chitta suddhi, pure mind. The pure mind attains jnana, which is what is meant by salvation. So eventually jnana must be reached. That is, the ego must be traced to its source. But to those to whom this does not appeal, we have to say that satkarmas lead to chitta suddhi, and chitta suddhi will lead to right knowledge or jnana, and that in its turn gives salvation. What about motives? Are the motives for performing actions not important? Whatever is done lovingly, with righteous purity and peace of mind, is a good action. Everything which is done with the strain of desire and with agitation filling the mind is classified as bad action. Do not perform any good action karma through a bad means, thinking it is sufficient if it bears good fruit. Because if the means is bad, even a good action will turn out to be a bad one. Therefore, even the means of doing actions should be pure. Sanskara says that we are all free, not bound, and that we shall all go back to God, from whom we have come as sparks from a fire. Then why should we not commit all sorts of sins? It is true, we are not bound, and that the real self has no bondage. It is true that you will eventually go back to your source. But meanwhile, if you commit sins, as you call them, you will have to face the consequences of such sins. You cannot escape them. If a man beats you, then can you say, I am free, I am not bound by these beatings, and I don't feel any pain? Let him beat on. If you can feel like that, you can go on doing what you like. What is the use of merely saying with your lips, I am free? It is said that the whole universe is God's play of consciousness and that everything is full of Brahman. Then why should we say that bad habits and bad practices should be discarded? Suppose there is some wound inside the human body. If you neglect it on the assumption that it is only a small part of the body, it causes pain to the whole body. If it is not cured by ordinary treatment, the doctor must come, cut off the affected portion with a knife, and remove the impurities. If the diseased part is not cut off, it will fester. If you do not bandage it after operating, pus will form. It is the same thing with regard to conduct. Bad habits and bad conduct are like a wound in the body. Every disease must be given appropriate treatment. So one should adhere to the conventional codes of behavior? Since the prescribed observances for self-discipline, niyamas help one to a considerable extent, they are worthy to be accepted and followed. But if they are found to obstruct the superior practice of inquiry for true knowledge, give them up immediately as deficient.